Okay, so in this video, let's talk about middlewares and nextjs. So in very simple terms, middlewares are just functions that you can run before handling a request in your server. The way this client server architecture works is that client makes a request to the server then processes that request and then returns a response back to the client. Now client could be anything. It could be a web browser, it could be a mobile app, desktop application, it could be anything. So essentially client is anything that can make a request, right? So this is usually what happens. The client makes a request to the server then processes that request and then returns a response to the client. Now, if we introduce middleware in this picture, we'll get something like this. So now what happens is that client makes a request to the server, middleware catches that request, runs some sort of operations or checks, and based on the result of those checks, it can decide to do a bunch of things. For example, in case of middleware, I could test a bunch of things. For example, if the user is authenticated, or whether if I want to modify the cookies, or whether if I want to redirect the user to a different URL, stuff like that. That is all possible inside of middleware. So let's take this auth example for a second. What happens is that if the user is logged in, we forward that request to the backend, and then backend then processes that request and sends back a response to the client. But if the user is not logged in, we can redirect the user to a login page. So let's see this in code. So we can see that this is a simple nextjs project I have. This is using app directory, and what I did was I basically created few folders here. So this is essentially the login page, and we have this profile page, and then I have also created a file called middleware.ts in the root of the project. The location of this file is really important. You cannot keep it anywhere. You have to keep this inside of root only, at the root level only. So let's have a look at the structure of this middleware.ts file. What we are essentially doing is that we are exporting a function called middleware that basically accepts a request. Okay, so in this case, let's assume that the user is not logged in. So when the user is not logged in, and if the user tries to open this particular URL, which is forward slash profile page. So in very simple terms, if the user tries to access this profile page, run this logic, right? So this middleware function is not going to be executed for the URLs that you have not added here, right? That is the first thing to understand. So let's say this is our way of saying that, okay, if the user is trying to access the profile page, let's check if the user is logged in. And if the user is not logged in, we will redirect the user to the login page, right? Okay, so let's see that in the browser. So for example, this is the landing page and this is a public page, so anybody can access it. Now let's try accessing the profile page. You see that? I tried accessing the profile page, but since I'm not logged in, you see, I'm not logged in. That is why I got redirected to login page. Also notice one thing really important. When I again try to access the profile page now, you'll see I got again redirected to login page. Also, the address in the address bar, also the address in the address bar changed to login page. There is another thing you can do, which is rewrite. So when you do rewrite instead of redirect, what it does, basically when you try to access the profile page, it is not going to change the URL in the address bar, but it is going to show you the response from the login page. So the only difference is that in this case, the URL is not being changed in the address bar, right? Okay, so let's also see how we can modify cookies or add some sort of extra headers option also. So what we can do, we can create a new instance of response, and then this is how we can set the cookies, and this is how we can set the headers, right? So now let's assume that the user is logged in. Okay, and now when we try to access the profile page, this logic is going to be executed again, and since we are now logged in, we are not going to be redirected to login page. We'll come here, we'll set a cookie named logged in, and we'll set its value to true, and then we'll also set a custom header that has this custom value, and then we are essentially returning the response. Let's see if this works or not. So this is the profile page. I'll just simply refresh that, and let me just open the network tab. Let me refresh the page again, and we can see this is the profile. This is the request that we are talking about, and if you see, we can see this is our custom header. with a custom value. Also, in order to check the cookie value, we can go to application, then we can go to cookies, and then we can click on this address, and there we can see logged in is set to true. So that's how we can modify cookies. We can add few things in headers, things like that. And that's all for this video. I'll catch you in the next one.